So on these, we are getting into square roots of negative numbers. Normally that doesn't work, but but it turns out we actually can do something with these. I can factor this down. I can always, when it's a square root of negative, I can always factor out a -1 every time. And so then that leaves me a 54. Well, is there a perfect square that divides into 54? Why, yes, there is. It's called 9. Okay, and it goes in 6 times. All right. So I know the square root of 9 is 3. And it turns out we call the square root of -1 I. And then the square root of 6 is just square root of 6. And then that's it. Now, you can check that on your calculator, believe it or not. And let's see that. So if we go square root of -54, it looks like, oh, doesn't like it. Yeah, because I'm doing square root. Let me go to mode. And oh yeah, it's only working with real numbers. So I'll go to a plus bi and hit enter. You should too. And then that was on mode. Then I'll go second quit. Now when I do it again, it should work. Okay. So it gives me that. And there's that I that I found. Okay, so what, okay, my answer I came up with was 3i root 6. So if I go 3, now the I is not this green one right here. That's just the letter I. The imaginary number I is right here, blue decimal point. And then we'll do square root of 6. Do we get the same thing? Yes, we do. Therefore, we've simplified it correctly. All right. So that's where the imaginary number I is, second decimal point. And that's how we do it. Okay. So in this section, oh, whoops, I got to turn that back on. In this section, I equals square root of -1. That is the fundamental property or identity for this stuff. Let's do a little bit more, shall we? All right, I like it. Okay, so this negative, this negative sign is outside the radical, so that doesn't do anything new. But the one inside, we can say, hey, I can factor out a factor of -1 because of the -60. And 60, is there a perfect square that goes into that? It's going to be 4, and it goes in 15 times. So now this negative sign out front, it never does anything. It just stays there. Square root of -1 is I, square root of 4 is 2, and square root of 15 is square root of 15. Okay, why did I write it in the order I did? It's just tradition. You could have changed the order. Okay, and that's how that's done. What if it was something like square root of -3? Well, you know, that factor of -1, that can come out, but there's no perfect squares that divide into 3, so it's just that. That's as far as it goes. Okay. So that's kind of the idea there. All right, so on these, now we're going to multiply or divide these radicals, and it's very Karate Kid, okay? Pull out the eyes first. And if that was kind of gross, I apologize. All right, so for this guy, there's that square root of there's that factor of -1 inside the square, well, all the square roots. So we pull out the eyes first, okay? Before we do anything else. Sometimes that'll make a difference, and sometimes it won't, and that's okay. All right, cool. Well, now the eyes can cancel just like anything else because there's one on the top, one on the bottom, and I can rewrite this as square root of 64/2 all in one shot, which is square root of 32. And 32 has a perfect square called 16. It goes in twice, and the square root of 16 is 4. That is as far as I can take that one. The other one, pull out the eyes first. So I get I root 2 times I root 32. Okay. Now I can do I times I is I squared, and the square root of 2 times 32. Now, on the last one, it wouldn't have made a difference if you pulled the i's out first. On this one, it will make a difference. All right, so that gives me I squared is, oh my heavens, equals square root of 64. Wait a minute. What? That there. Okay. And let's see, square root of 64 is 8. Now, what the heck is I squared? Well, we said a moment ago that in this section, everything comes back to this. I equals square root of negative 1. So if I, if I say, well, what is I squared? Well, I got to square both sides. And square root and squaring cancel each other, so that I squared is just negative 1. So down here, I get 8 times negative 1, or negative 8. So pull out the i's first before you do multiplication and division. Otherwise, sometimes you get the wrong answer, sometimes you won't. All right, now adding and subtracting complex numbers. Okay, a complex number is just a number like 1 minus 4i, where there's 2 parts to it. There's the part with the imaginary number I, and there's the part without it. Okay, now it turns out that the imaginary number I, it's not actually imaginary. It's very real. It's just hard to visualize. Every time you use your cell phone, part of the engineering for that uses imaginary numbers. Same thing with airplanes, the way they're built, certain parts of them. Okay, so let's see. So on these, when it's addition and subtraction, it's just like what you'd expect, even if there were no imaginary numbers. You'd say, well, there's no like term to go with the 1, so 1. And then I've got minus 4i plus negative 5i would be minus 9i. And you can check these things on your calculator. Just plug in the original on the main screen, plug in the final, and see if they match up. So that's not a big deal. Let's see if we can find another one to bring you all kinds of happiness and joy. All right, so we got 2 complex numbers, and we've got 5 minus 1 is 4. Then we've got negative 6i minus negative I is minus 5i, because we have negative 6 minus negative 1 makes negative 5. And I got it. All right, so what about multiplying complex numbers? Well, you just dance. You got 1 boy and 2 girls. Every boy dances with every girl. So I multiply those together, and I get 3i. Multiply those together, and I get minus 15i squared. But I squared, we learned, is negative 1. And negative 15 minus 1 is plus 15. And tradition says that this term comes first, but it doesn't matter. Okay. Let's do one more of them, and then that'll be good. Okay, so this time we've got 2 boys, 2 girls. Every boy dances with every girl. So we've got that gives us 18. And that gives us minus 12i, then minus 18i, and then plus 12i squared. Okay. So minus 12i minus 18i, that's minus 30i. And 12 times negative 1 is minus 12. And I can do 18 minus 12 is 6. And you know what? Why don't we just check our work on that one? But first, I got to do some erasing so I can actually see the calculator here in a second. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let me go to that. Okay, so -6 plus 6i. Okay, so I'll just pause it and put it in. Check this out. Ha 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 ha. 6 minus 30i. I know what you're all thinking. Cool. I don't have to learn it. I can just do it on my calculator. Well, I want you to be able to do it both ways. Practice by hand, practice by calculator. And that ought to about do it.